Hello everyone and welcome to another video. The Ferris wheel is one of the worst flat rides in the game and known for making guests think that they want to get off of it. This begs the question, is it possible to beat one of the most difficult scenarios in the game, which is Amity Airfield, with only Ferris wheels? With a goal of 3,000 guests in 4 years, Amity Airfield is infamous for being super tricky to complete, so it is the perfect place to build our Ferris wheel hell. The start is very similar to the crazy castle excavation video. First we remove all the paths and scenery and then we build some rides and some stalls. Now we have everything we need to run all advertisement campaigns. We're going to have plenty of money later on, so there's no need to do short 2-week campaigns first to save on money. We're immediately going for the 12 weeks so that we don't have to refresh them as often. Right before we bought the ads, I set the entry price to €20, which later turned out was a bit much for only 10 Ferris wheels, but that doesn't really matter. With 4 years to get 3,000 guests and constant ads, guest generation is not going to be the bottleneck in this challenge. The problem will be keeping guests in the park, so the few we didn't get because of a high entry price in the first few months don't matter. After we built another module of 10 Ferris wheels, I increased the entry price to €45, which is the maximum that you want to charge in Amity Airfield. Every guest spawns with 45, 55, 65 or €75, so if you charge more than 45, some will not be able to enter the park. To keep the ones who spawn with €45 in the park for a bit longer, a cash machine is useful so that they can afford food and drinks. As I said earlier, the most difficult aspect of this challenge is keeping the guests in the park, as they will get bored with Ferris wheels quite quickly. Therefore, it is a good idea to place queue line TVs in the queue line, so that guests that are queuing for rides will stay there forever. This is especially important since I set the number of rotations for the Ferris wheels to the maximum of 3. This raises the stats a little bit and keeps the guests on the ride for quite a bit longer. This challenge is all about keeping the guests busy with the rides for as long as possible. That's also why there is a long queue line. In case one of the Ferris wheels gets quite popular, it will be able to store quite a few guests in the queue line. Now that everything is sorted, it's time to build a lot more Ferris wheels and of course keep advertising. By the end of April year 1 we have 60 of them, divided into 6 modules of 10. With each Ferris wheel attracting 45 guests, the soft guest cap is now already 2,700. Considering that we're going to build a lot more later, we will not have to worry about the soft guest cap at all. Instead of continuing to expand sideways, we're now going to build a second row behind the first. I left a little gap in between the rows to build some stalls in, so that guests won't have to walk as far to get their food or to relieve themselves. To make the park look a bit more interesting, the second row of Ferris wheels will be red instead of yellow. For the guests it makes no difference, but it made me a little happier and I hope it makes you happier too. After 1 year we have 120 Ferris wheels and almost 1,400 guests, which is well ahead of schedule. If we keep this up, we will end up with more than 5,000 guests at the end of year 4, but I have a feeling it won't be that easy. During year 2 we add another row of Ferris wheels and this time they're blue. Even though the individual Ferris wheels are cheap, it still took a few months of saving up to be able to build all 60 of these. With a total of 180 Ferris wheels we can support more than 8,000 guests, but unfortunately the guest count doesn't quite reflect that. After getting about 1,350 guests in the first year, we only got an additional 500 in the second year. But with roughly 1,850 guests, we are more than halfway to the goal, while we still have half of the allotted time left, so it is still possible. In year 3, it's time to build a fourth and final row of Ferris wheels, and you guessed it, this time they're going to be green. I'm not sure how necessary this row will be, but it does look nice and we have the money. At the end of the year, I can say that it didn't help much with getting more guests. In the third year we only got another 400 guests, and not only that, we only got 100 guests in the second half of the third year. It seems that we have hit a limit and that we need to do something different to keep the guests in the park. To prove that the problem is that the guests are leaving, we can check the park statistics. Here we can see that even though we only have about 2,200 guests in the park, we have had more than 11,000 admissions. This means that almost 9,000 guests have entered the park and already left again. Compare this with my very first completion of Amity Airfield, which has 3,200 guests from only 5,800 admissions. I had two ideas to make the guests stay in the park for longer. First, I hired 100 entertainers to make the guests happier so that they hopefully would stay in the park for longer. And after that I fired all my mechanics. Wait, what? Why on earth would I do this? Well, when a ride breaks down, the guests that are on it will stay on it and the guests that are queuing for it will stay in the queue. This keeps those guests in the park forever if the ride doesn't get fixed. Not only that, when enough Ferris wheels break down, the queue lines for the remaining working ones will grow longer, trapping even more guests once it breaks down. This actually worked. Suddenly the guest count starts going up quite quickly, and by May year 4 we have more than 2,500 guests. Halfway July we have reached 3,000 guests with a park rating of well over the 600 that we need. It's absolutely astonishing how well this works. If we look around, we can see a lot of guests being trapped on the Ferris wheels. The ones near the entrance are more popular, and sure enough we even find some full queue lines on broken down Ferris wheels there. We continue to get more guests, and by the end of October year 4 we have almost 3,400 guests in the park, beating the scenario fairly comfortably. So there we have it, we just beat Amity Airfield by only building Ferris wheels and stalls. It seems that by firing all the mechanics and making the park worse, we have made it better at reaching the goal. I felt so smart when I saw my weird strategy have this great effect. But unfortunately it's all a lie. The only reason we got this many guests is the entertainers and the happiness they provide. Even with 3 rotations, Ferris wheels have a very low intensity rating of only 1, which falls outside of the preferred intensity range of a lot of guests. This means that all those guests will never get on any Ferris wheels, as they only ride rides with an intensity rating in their preferred range. However, this range can be extended a bit if the guest is happy. With maximum happiness, guests will ride rides up to about 2.5 points outside of their stated range. In Amity Airfield, the guests come into the park fairly unhappy, so we need the entertainers to force them to be happier. Once they are very happy, all the guests with a minimum of 2 or 3 intensity will now be able to ride the Ferris wheels and stay in the park. To show that this is what caused the guests to stay in the park, I did another run where I picked off at the start of year 4 but only hired the 100 entertainers. There is some randomness to it, but in this run I actually got even more guests than in my original run, proving that firing the mechanics was entirely unnecessary. This isn't actually the first time that I attempted this. Nearly 3 years ago I attempted to do this exact challenge, also for a video, but I gained guests at such a slow rate that I wrote it off as impossible. In September of last year I did a very similar challenge on a livestream where I tried to beat Amity Airfield with just flat rides, but failed again and had to resort to using all gentle and thrill rides. This shows that you should never write anything off as impossible just because it's hard. With enough perseverance and just a little bit of insanity you can do almost anything. If you want to see the entire run, I uploaded it to my second channel and linked it in the description. Thank you all for watching and I will see you in the next video.